right. What's going on, fellow art warriors? Welcome back to another monthly challenge critique stream. And guys, I'm happy to be back after having become a dad about a month and almost 2 months ago. So, yeah, Alice unfortunately is not joining me today. She is taking a really awesome honeymoon in Japan. So, yeah, she is having fun doing that, but I think she will most likely be back with me for next month's challenge, probably the November one. Um, so let's get down to business. This challenge critique stream is for the months of August and September. And as always, guys, you did a really killer job with these. And I was really happy to see some, like, actually really finished pieces. And I'm excited to go over these with you. I did want to mention that there is the new monthly challenge for this month, October. I know I didn't give you guys the whole month for that, unfortunately, but I think if you guys want to participate in that, it's something you could bang out pretty quickly. And what we ended up doing is basically dressing up a black cat in like a Halloween outfit. So I thought that would be like pretty Halloweeny and fun. So I'm looking forward to seeing your guys' work with that. All right, let's pick our winners for the past 2 months. So I took a look at these, and of course everybody had really awesome and different work, which is really cool to see. But there was two that stood out to me. So I'm going to pick a winner for each month. And the first one is Lumber Bumber's piece. So congrats to Lumber Bumber. This is a really awesome, finalized, nice looking like portfolio piece for you, I think. And then the other one is Peter Yo's piece. This was the challenge that Alice set up while I was away. And I think Peter Yo really nailed this one. So I think let's go into critiquing their pieces first. And then there's like a lot of stuff this time, guys. So I don't know if I'm going to get through everybody's, but what I would like to do is do a couple like more hardcore critiques and then just kind of go through everybody's work and kind of briefly take some notes and talk about those. I see Meglet is in the chat. What's up, Meglet? Nice to be back. Thanks for joining. Okay, let's go through the winners' pieces first. So here's Lumber Bumber's piece. And the other thing that was cool too, guys, was in our like Discord monthly challenge channel, it was cool to see some of you guys presenting your thumbnails and your processes as well. If I was just doing 1 month's worth of challenges, I'd probably go over some more of that stuff, but keep that up as well, because it's nice for us to see kind of like what you guys are thinking and how you're progressing through the challenge. All right, I'm going to bring this reference in as well so that we can kind of have some context. So I guess I should read this challenge as well. So basically what I set up was create an OC utilizing the study reference model. And I thought this character's pose, the lighting, and everything lent itself very well for a pretty cool character for you guys to design. He goes by Father Nicholas now. Congrats, Baby Life. Hope Baby Life is going well. Baby Life is going well. Our baby has pretty bad acid reflux, unfortunately. So that's something we've been kind of dealing with. And yeah, besides the lack of sleep, everything's been going really well. So excuse me also if I'm a little brain dead, but yeah, you guys, I think, know how it goes with being a new parent. So Father Nicholas, I like that. That's really funny. Okay, cool. So, all right. This is a tough one because I get the intention for the lighting scheme with this image. Like, there's something in the distance that's casting a shadow on this character, but it's almost as if the character, I almost feel like the whole character, or more like half of the character, should be in shadow. So the first thing I'm going to do is set this in black and white and just kind of check it out. And this is something that is pretty difficult for me to visualize, and what I would personally do if I was doing more of a complex kind of shadow scheme like this is I would actually set up a very basic model in 3D. And it's almost like I wish there was a really really simple way. If anybody knows of like a website application where I can just go on and it's very low, like it's not going to take up a lot of RAM on my computer, so that I can use that as a reference during the streams, let me know, because yeah, it would be nice to actually like set up a model with you guys. But I think if the shadow is casting like this, let's see, I think the way you do this is you kind of like plot it out like, okay, the light rays here, let's go from another perspective, right? So if this is the light and this is the thing that's casting the shadow, let me zoom in a little bit. I think the way technically you're supposed to do it is like the light rays hit the thing and go a different color. From like the angle of the height of the light, so this would probably drop down a bit from this perspective. It's like it's going to do something like this in space, right? Hopefully you guys can see that, right? So anything within this is in shadow. So if your character is kind of like standing like here, right? We would probably think that shadow is going to hit like the bottom half of the character. Like the character's still going to be in shadow all the way out here. So it looks like Lumberbumber kind of did more of a shadow going down the character's legs, but because the character's like so close to the very edge of the shadow, it's almost like you want to be more apparent about where the shadow is like actually hitting the character, and also more accurately like cast the shadow on the ground instead of this like kind of blob. And then we also have to take into account where this little guy's shadow is on the ground as well. I think for simplicity's sake, what the easiest thing could have been with this what the easiest thing you could have done with this illustration is just like forgotten about this cast shadow and just said this character is in light, you know what I mean? The shadow kind of creates this like interesting shape on the ground, but it also just makes your life a lot harder. So I would say if you're going to do this, like either pose somebody in like actually take a photo of somebody in this position, like in front of a house or something like that, that's like partially in shadow, or find really good reference, or set up a 3D model. Because this is just something that's like very hard to imagine, like without having really good reference. I think Lumberbumber plotted this shadow pretty nicely, like behind this like cupcake stand thing, and maybe these shadows on the ground and the car as well. But yeah, this is just like kind of confusing, like how much this character is actually like in shadow or not in shadow. So that's the first thing I would just say. In terms of, let's again take a look in black and white. I think the other thing to think about when you're pulling from reference and you're trying to apply this reference to a big outdoor illustration is you need to consider the light sources in your illustration and kind of adapt them to the reference. So what Lumberbumber might have also wanted to do was like find a reference of a person in a similar situation outside, and then used this person's features and characteristics and colors and stuff like that in the illustration. So let's just do a Google search really quick. So like woman standing outside, partially in shadow. Let's see what we get, if we get anything good. Probably better to go on Pinterest for something like this. Yeah, let's see. Let's see if I find anything interesting. And let me know what you guys think too in terms of finding reference. Like, how do you guys like combine your references? Like, what's your sort of approach? Because I think for me at least, I have like a couple different approaches that I use. Side and shadow. Sometimes these very specific searches are pretty hard to find something that's like let's see if I can find something. Kind of just finding like completely in light or completely in shadow. Okay, yeah, I'm not like, hold on one sec guys, I think I kind of found something. I don't know, I don't want to take up too much of your time just searching for a photo, but that's kind of what I would do is I would go and I would like find a very specific search of like what you're looking for and kind of go from there. Here's maybe an example that's not directly like the reference, but I think it's a good way to, here we go. Let's take a look at this, for example. Okay. So here's a situation in which a shadow is being cast on a person that's outside, right? And we can very clearly see the sunlight on her hair and on her forehead, but then we can see this big bar of shadow behind her, and that's kind of like casting on the top of her face. We see how hard the line is of the shadow that's being cast on her, and it's making it very apparent that she's partially in shadow, right? With Lumberbumber's piece, I think it's not as clear as to whether or not like the person's in shadow or the person's in light, or it's almost like this is like a spotlight shadow, like more of a soft kind of shadow going on towards the legs, but then they're showing us a really hard shadow on the ground. So at the end of the day, that's the point I'm trying to make. The other thing I was starting to bring up is the fact that, okay, so this model is in a studio with like white surrounding her. So there's kind of just like white light that's bouncing around to make the shadows softer and more like rounded around the character. Whereas, again, if we're doing a, sunlight kind of pointing at a 3/4 angle at the character, we're going to get a lot harsher shadows. So probably like under the nose, right? We'd get more of a hard shadow, like in the eye here, right here. Under the chin, we'd probably get a harder shadow. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen me do this before, but when I'm plotting out my light and shadow, I'll literally do this where I'll kind of draw out these like shapes, and then it makes it like very obvious where the light and the shadow is supposed to go. The other thing to consider as well is that she's not in a dome of white, she's in a dome of sky. So there's skylight kind of popping out all around the character. So what we want to do is we want to take some of these blues, maybe like dull them down a little bit. Let's see. And start blending some of these blues back into the top of the character. And what that's going to do is it's going to not only breathe some more life into the colors that Lumberbumber is using, but it's also just going to make it feel more like this character is like in the environment. So Lumberbumber kind of established these shadows here, and what I'm doing is I'm like bringing that cool light back into those areas. So before I even do this, like I'm seeing it a little bit on the cheek, a little bit on the forehead. Lumberbumber has this nice metal going on that's reflecting the sky, which is great. But I think we can just kind of push this a little bit more to really make this character feel like she's, you know, in a dome of blue, basically. Let's see. This is the other thing I see quite often, specifically with characters wearing jeans, is I see people going from like saturated to white very quickly, and it starts to like blow out the color of jeans. And if you look at a reference of jeans, they usually don't get that white unless the material itself is actually has like a white like tint to it. Like sometimes you can see what is it called, like aged jeans have like that white fabric to them, but I don't know if that's necessarily what Lumberbumber was going for. So I would kind of like create more of a matte, slightly more matte material. It's just going to make this fabric feel more real, because I think they nailed the metal. I think this is supposed to maybe be like a latex, and if that's the case, right, and it's supposed to be like more shiny, we'd want to reflect that light on other parts of the body as well. So that's also something to kind of keep in mind. It's funny too, because I would usually say that people struggle with shinier materials, but it's almost like Lumberbumber struggles more with cloth materials than the metallic stuff. So I'm just gonna kind of go in and paint through a little bit. I would say this hand here, I'm not entirely sure what the hand is doing. Um, I know that Lumberbumber was trying to maybe mimic this, but it's like if you're gonna just go for this positioning, I would just straight up copy this hand because you have really good reference for it. Right now, it's kind of like in front of the character, and I think it's just not really doing the character any justice because it's kind of confused as to what's happening. So I'd also really, for anybody, stay away from these really harsh color adjustment tools. So like it looks like Lumberbumber used like Color Dodge or something like that. That's a really easy way to blow out your paintings and get really weird colors, like not in a good way. I would save those colors for, or sorry, those adjustment layers for like when you actually know what you're doing, and really really know your color theory. Let me read some of your guys' comments. I try to draw the pose I'm imagining best I can, then I look at multiple refs and try to correct the pose I made. If it's too complicated, I'll set up a ref in 3D. I think that's a good way to go about it. Scallier Pepper says, I usually end up with one ref for pose, one ref for lighting, and then a million random ones for exact details. And here's Lumberbumber. Hello. It was meant to be like the old age jeans that's lost its dye. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. I think you still just maybe went to white too quickly, or you integrated too much of the like spray brush into it. And what that does is it starts to like fade around the form, instead of you being like, okay, I'm purposefully going to do aged jeans, and I know aged jeans kind of like have that like whitish material to them, so I'm just going to take some white and paint it back into my matte material to kind of add like another layer on top of my already established lighting, right? I think it's almost like you were trying to blend two lighting scenarios almost like into each other, and that's what was making it look a little funky. I want to try the bakery in the background. Is it possible the texture didn't work? Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was thinking too. So let me just go in and kind of like touch up some of these things, and then we can kind of talk about it. So the other thing too, your shadows are like super warm. I'm going to try to make them a little bit harder and kind of cool them down a little bit, and you'll see how that's going to start to make the character feel like it's got more color variation. as opposed to it almost looks like and I don't know, I forget what your process was like, but maybe you started in grayscale and then you started like spraying colors over top. And that's the other thing that's kind of hard too, because you end up like losing a lot of color detail you would have and you would want in specific areas if you just went right into color. So you can see here's a good example on her arm, right? Like this right here is not like a cast shadow or anything like that. It's just more like a shadow plane on the arm, right? Like it's kind of turning away to shadow. And we're going from kind of a warmer color to slightly sort of cooler color as it like wraps that bend. Whereas if you were just like, okay, I have like a gray tone here and a gray tone here, and then you end up just spraying overlay or something like that, then it just becomes like two versions of the same box of gray instead of slightly tilting more towards cool or warm. So hopefully that makes sense for you guys. And it's okay to kind of lay down grayscale to get your values correct and then go into color. But what I would recommend is go into color sooner rather than later, or else you're going to be doing a lot of this like fixing up stuff after the fact, and it just gets like really tedious to do it that way. I'm actually working on a character right now for a commission. I'm not allowed to share it right now, unfortunately, but I actually started in grayscale and I was like very loose with my grays. I just blocked out like, it was almost like a five value grayscale system. And then I went and sprayed some color over it. And I actually did this trick, and I don't know, maybe you guys will find some benefit to this. But what you can do, let's see, is, so this is a very quick and dirty way to do this, but I just want to show you just so you guys kind of understand. Okay, let's say we want our lights to be more warm and we want our darks to be more cool, right? So I tend to like to use multiply when I'm overlaying colors as well. You just kind of have to mess around with like the saturation and the brightness like a lot to not totally like wreck your color palette. But what you can do is if you double click on your adjustment layer, you can mess around with these sliders to basically be like, okay, I want these blues to just be on my like dark colors, right? So I can pull this more so it's only on the darks. And you see how it's like very, very harsh, how it's like transitioning from light to dark. If you hold Alt, you can split this now. And now I can just be like, okay, from like this range to this range, I think it's actually like from this range to black, I've got my blue colors, right? And then you can do the opposite with the warms. So I'm going to pull this until I'm seeing kind of more like my shadows. And then I can kind of, oops, let's do this. Okay. So what this helps with is it like establishes your lights and cools, right? Now I can go back in and start blending colors over top. So like, I don't know, soft light or something like that. And kind of just do some like basic colors. But what it's doing is you'll see underneath now, here's a good example on the stomach. Right? we're still having kind of warmer colors on the stomach, and then on the light areas, and then cooler colors on the shadow areas. You see how much my slider jumped? I went for like a very extreme example, but this is just a way to kind of help you build up like a base. Otherwise, look, when I turn these off, it's kind of like everything is like in the same range in this box, right? This gives us more color variation. And what's cool about this technique as well is once you do this, you can now still kind of mess with these. You'd be like, all right, I want these to be a little bit cooler. You can mess with the colors a little bit more and say like, all right, I don't want them to be so saturated. I can lighten that a bit. You can even do a mid-tone color, right? So let's say you want your mid-tone to be like more of a peachy kind of color to really pop out the like fleshy colors and stuff like that. And what I could do is just like reduce this. What we could also do is underneath everything, do an adjustment layer, knock down the blacks. Bring some more color into there. So yeah, hopefully you guys can see how you can start like establishing more of a base before just going right into spraying color right on top. Okay, that was a little long-winded tutorial. Let's get back into the paint over. All right, so I was kind of just like painting in the lights and shadows. Giving a little bit of like a harder edge to some of these shadow planes, so like under the nose as well. I like these green tinted eyeglasses. That's pretty cool. I'm almost wondering if you can like bring that green somewhere else on the character, like I don't know, maybe there's like a little, if we actually like give her belt loops, maybe there's like a little pendant or something she has down here, and we can bring just a little bit of that green color back in there. Just an idea. The other thing too, design wise, is like, okay, you have this gun holster. I would actually like look up, again, reference of how gun holsters work and what they look like, and because right now this is just kind of looking very blobby. Let's say, I don't know, give it a little bit more design, put more of an occlusion shadow where the gun is like actually touching the side of the pants. And now I'm trying to actually show the like cast shadow from the gun. I actually don't think it would wrap around that much. And even the gun itself, right? Like I can't even really tell like the design of the gun. And I think that's pretty important for this kind of like sci-fi character. You have to think about the fact that the gun is an accessory to the design of the character, just like this little like earpiece thing too. Like it's like, and maybe you just ran out of time, and I do have to acknowledge that for kind of everybody's pieces. I know that happens with these. You only get a month to do this stuff. But if you're going to go for these design elements and you really want this to be like a portfolio piece, like you really have to go crazy with them and think through how all this stuff would work, what it would look like, how does it fit into like your overall aesthetic and all that kind of stuff. Even this like shoulder piece thing, it's like, I kind of want like a cut line in here to maybe just show how she puts it on. I don't know, maybe there's like a little button or something that she presses to unclip it. And all of these little details kind of help you sell the story you're trying to tell with your character design. Otherwise, it's kind of like, what's the point, right? We want to tell a story with our character and we want to make it feel believable. So, let's see. I get it, there's no natural hue shift, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. Very graphic novel-y. Yeah, it's like you've started to have a really nice hand here, but it's just feeling so orange, you know, and I think that's because, like you said, there's not really that hue shift happening. Yeah, the sneakers and everything, it's like you could have gone crazy with the design elements. And it looks maybe like you kind of ran out of time with some of this stuff. But sneakers are a fashion statement. You know what I mean? Like even in real life. So you want to make sure that she's showing them off. Because obviously she like cares about her appearance. And it's almost like you should, as the illustrator, also care for her about how she dresses herself, you know? This side as well is just kind of like not totally sure what's going on here. Okay, I just want to briefly look at this little robot guy. This is cool. I think, and this is what I see quite a lot with some of your guys' works, just don't forget about your occlusion shadows. So anywhere where pieces are touching, you don't want to create an outline. You kind of want to just paint in a shadow, right? Like, otherwise pieces look like they're just sort of floating there. So like right here is another good example. Like I would just paint some shadows in where all these pieces touch. And you'll see too, look, once I'm finished, I'm gonna turn this layer on and off, and you'll see just what these little tiny shadows, how much of a difference they end up making. This is kind of interesting too, how you created this like glass or plastic top. Here's the other thing too, right? If we've got sky going down, I understand that the sun is coming from the left, but I would still on these sides like paint in some blue. I would also probably say that this is probably gonna cast just a little bit of a shadow that way. Let's see what else. I think you'd have more blue on this lens where it's like reflecting the sky. And you'd have to imagine this is reflecting the ground. So I would grab more of that ground color and pop that back in. Don't be afraid to pick colors from your background to actually integrate into your paintings. I do like that you hit this edge with that blue color. That shows me you're really thinking about the sky. So that's awesome. I would probably hit this one too though. Let's see. Let me just think for a sec. This is the other thing too is and I've seen this with a lot of your guys' works, is with these square compositions, it's really hard to kind of place a character in the space. So like I would really think about how you want to crop this and how much of this background you feel like you actually need in order to like successfully execute this design. You know, like you could have brought this in a lot more and brought the cupcake over a little bit to still get that in. The other thing you could have done as well is I'm a fan of these more like kind of wider shots where the character's over to the side. So just something to think about with your crops. Like I think there's just too much space around the character. The last thing I'll say about the ground too is it looks like Lumber Bumber kind of added this in because otherwise it would have looked really empty, right? Well, this is where you can start thinking about prop design, right? Like what would be on the ground in a little town square like this? Like, I don't know, a sewer grate, you know, like a manhole. So you could have like a circle here. Maybe there's like, maybe this is a lane. And because this is like a sci-fi-y piece, we could have like lights, you know, directing the people walking or something like that. You could have, yeah, bigger like lane marks, like big rectangles that kind of go across. I don't know. But just thinking through those things are gonna help. The other thing too, when you have like this really big wide empty area, like you have all these plants here, it's like maybe build a planter that comes out a little bit onto the street, or maybe you've got like a bench. You know what I mean? Like start thinking about elements that would be in a little town square like this and just start adding some of them in. And again, that's where reference kind of comes in. All right. Yeah, I almost think knocking out that shadow on the ground like makes the piece like make more sense as well. Okay, so yeah, I didn't do a whole lot with this one. It was mostly including the skylight into the character, creating harsher shadows so that we don't think that this character is like inside like the reference. Maybe knocking out the bottom, adding some little props to the character to kind of give her more like personality, and not forgetting about our occlusion shadows so that it looks like things are actually like pressed together. Okay, let's see. I can kind of figure out where the light hits, but have trouble with how much they will affect the hue and value shift. I had originally added yellow police tapes. Yeah, I think keeping that in would have been cool, but couldn't render them properly. I mean, with something like police tape, it's like, I don't know exactly how you would, how you were planning to do that, right? But, you know, you kind of have this like color, and then you could have added just like bars. Yeah, that would have helped sell the story too, right? It's like, are they investigating a crime scene? Is she a cop? You know, like that would have helped, and I think that would have actually been a really cool idea because it would have juxtaposed this like really flowery, cutesy kind of background, and it's like she's coming up on some sort of crime scene, and there's like caution tape around. But you're also asking about can kind of figure out where the lights hits, but have trouble with how much they will affect the hue and value shift. I mean, it just depends on the time of day and the lighting, right? So it's very obvious that you have kind of like this angled sunlight, right? So it's not quite like noon where the sunlight is directly down. It's kind of at a 3/4 angle. It doesn't look like golden hour, like 5 o'clock when the sun is like setting and everything's kind of like orangey. So it's, I don't want to say it's simple, but your lighting scenario is like pretty easy to find reference for, in that your lights are warm, your shadows are cool, the sunlight would be pretty harsh and create more sharp shadows. And yeah, I think that's really all you have to consider. And like we were saying before, maybe pick up a free program like Daz 3D, so you can actually like pose a model and set up some lights yourself. There was a crime scene perimeter. Yeah, see, that would have been so cool. It's unfortunate you didn't add that in, but maybe after the critique you can go back into this one and kind of render some of this stuff out and add that back in. So yeah, nice job. This was a fun piece to go over and critique. Okay, I think the next one I'm gonna do is the winner for the September challenge, and then I'm gonna go through everybody's pieces and kind of just like take notes, and we can talk about them. So the winner for that one is Peter Yo, and this is a really cool character design. So the challenge that Alice set was design a character or creature that evolved or adapted to live in low light, or design the environment itself. So what was cool about what Peter did was he not only created or designed the character, but utilized the study reference of the month to give this like creature. So that's pretty cool. So let's just kind of take some notes on this, and like always, let's put this in black and white so we can really check the values. So I think what you guys will see, hopefully right off the bat, is that there's this really harsh like backlight, right, or side lighting on the character. But I think that all of the values on the rounded parts of the character is feeling a little bit flat. So we could brighten those up a bit to make it not look like there's just like this drawn on kind of side lighting. So the other thing too, and I understand this is like almost like a, like I don't know, how would you describe this? Like a creepy creature, right? Like the creature maybe doesn't have like this super shiny dress, but I do think integrating some of the satin kind of color onto the creature would also help, again, like kind of juxtapose the texture of the dress compared to the texture of the creature, and just kind of give this like weird look. So let's see. I'm going to kind of start with the face. And I see this quite a lot with this like directional lighting. Sometimes it kind of looks like almost like an anime where they just are like, okay, here's the character's head, right? And then I want to introduce side lighting. So you take like one thickness brush and then you're just like, there's the side light, right? You have to consider that there are dips and crevices and, roundness to things, right? So there's going to be kind of volume to that light wrapping around. So I'm going to just paint into this and kind of show you guys what I'm talking about. So for example, sorry guys, I keep saying I'm going to paint into this and then I like add more notes. So like there's these kind of I don't know, weird forms going across the head. This is something that you could accentuate on the other side and almost use that form to your advantage when lighting the character. Because now if we really punch these out, we can have our light follow this more dramatically, and it's not going to just look like a marker line on the side of the head. So I'd also watch out for stuff like this, right? So if this is just a little mark that you haven't cleaned up, like clean it up. Otherwise, it gets really confusing. Like right here, too. I don't think the light from the side would hit underneath there. And if you're getting to a point where you're like, man, I use this color and it's blending in too much with the background, you can do one of two things. You can either lighten the background or darken the ear, or the opposite, right? Like put another light that's like kind of casting downwards to bring that out, and then darken the background. I would think in this scenario, yeah, maybe just lightening the background just a little bit in some of these areas and darkening that edge is going to help it pop out more. The other thing too is you have kind of this cool light. Well, Peter has this kind of cool light happening. You know, I'm not going to recommend you guys use soft light, but I'm just doing this to kind of help quickly paint this in. But introducing some of that color with the light on, like where it's transitioning from the light to the shadow, is going to help it feel more realistic as well. And not so like just drawn on. All right, let's see. Yeah, like there wouldn't be any light under there. There wouldn't be any light under there. Or under here. And again, once I'm done, we'll kind of snap this back and forth, and you'll see how these like little changes really end up making a difference when thinking about lighting. That's why studying references are so important to learning, because, you know, if I had reference for this piece as I'm painting over it, obviously it's going to be even better, but I've practiced so much that at this point I kind of can see things that I'm like, yeah, I think it would probably be more like this, right? And I think that's kind of the goal with painting, is you want to get to the point where references are always, you know, they're always going to help, but if you can eyeball some things correctly, it's going to make your life easier as well. Let's put this more in shadow. And as always, guys, too, like if I say anything that is confusing, please let me know in the chat so I can kind of clarify, or if you have any questions about anything I'm doing. See, here's a good example of occlusion shadow, right? Like if we go black and white, like it's very hard to tell that the dress is on top of the arm. So we want to add a darker value to really showcase that it's touching the skin. And at a certain point, you kind of have to just decide, like, is the skin brighter here or is the dress brighter here, right? And then it's going to create that volume shift. Those are really, I like that the muscle is kind of showing through and everything. That's pretty cool. This also looks to me like the artist started in black and white and just like painted, like sprayed over. Again, it's not the end of the world, but if you're gonna do that, you really have to go back in and paint things out to give it volume and color variation and all that kind of stuff. I think once you start doing more figure study, like reference studies, you'll start to realize these like very gradual shifts and like how much light is needed to make something feel appropriately rounded. Like here under the chin. It's a cool character design. This is one of those designs where it's like you look at it and you just kind of like get it. You're like, oh, I could imagine this monster being in like a movie or something like that, or a game. Like you can imagine in your mind like where you might find a creature like this. So here too, right? If the light is kind of coming like at a little bit of a down angle, then it's going to cast a little bit of a shadow underneath this fabric. It's like you really have to think through all of these folds and everything, how the light is hitting all this stuff. Yeah, so I think mostly what I'm doing is just really pushing the lights and the darks more. So if we go in black and white, I'm adding more shadow under the chin to pop out the head a little bit more. I'm really trying to round out this side light so it doesn't feel so just like drawn on, and trying to keep it as consistent as I possibly can. So where I'm noticing that it's still failing a little bit is like up on the sleeve here, where it's like blending into the background quite a lot, and also just like on this upper arm. So whenever you see an area like that in black and white, here's another example, like on the hip here, you can be like, okay, I need a little bit more like roundness to the form. So like here, kind of slowly like build up this gradient. On the arm as well, it's like here's where, just for simplicity's sake, just add overlay and just pop this out, brighten this a little bit more. And yeah, I'm gonna do some quick adjustments. So I'm just trying to like follow these forms that were like already established and just pump them a little bit more, just push stuff. It's almost like sculpting in clay, right? You want to like pull forms out and press forms in until it feels like it's actually three-dimensional. Oh, I didn't even notice. See, like here's a storytelling feature, the shackle, right? But we don't know what it's connected to. We can barely see it. Like that would be an important feature to really like show off with this character. And this is kind of what I was talking about, is like, I think we could really pump up this yellow. Make it feel a little more vibrant compared to this like dull, almost like translucent skin. Cool. All right, I don't want to spend the entire time rendering this out, but I think you guys hopefully get the point. Oh, the other thing you can do too really quick is when you hit a really harsh light like this, you can at the very end add a little bit of a bloom, so you can just kind of spray around where the light is hitting, especially in a very dark environment like this, and it just gives a sense of atmosphere It makes the light really feel like it's bouncing and it's vibrant. So, yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. So yeah, hopefully when Peter gets a chance, he can go back in and kind of bump this up a little, because I think this is a really cool portfolio piece as well. All right, I'm gonna just kind of blow through these and talk about them as they come. Okay, so this was Antaya's piece for the September challenge, and Antaya was kind of sketching out some like really loose like thumbnails just to kind of get a sense of like what this thing would look like. And they wrote no eyes, highly evolved sensory organs, sense movement, pressure change, electrical currents. I like that Antaya is like thinking through all these things in the character design, and this is a really good practice, because the more questions you can ask yourself and the more things you can answer about your character, the more interesting the design is going to become. Extraterrestrial planet, a human evolves by some unknown way into a life form similar to the ones found deep in the Earth's oceans. So that's pretty cool. And then here's as far as Antaya got. Like, this is something I wish Antaya would finish up, because I can see where this could go, but it's a cool little like thumbnail piece. And then here's Antaya's character study, which I think turned out really cool. I think this is partially Antaya's like style, let's call it, but there's just some elements that just feel a little flat. Even if you have more of a flat like lighting scenario, there's some things that we can definitely sort of bump out. So like if I just very quickly put this in black and white, like, you know, first of all, we can create a little bit more of a vignette, so we can darken the bottom of the pants a little bit more. We can create just a little bit more volume. And then oops. It's very, very, very minor lighting stuff, but I do think it makes a difference if we go back and forth to just like push those lights and shadows a little bit more. Alright, let's see what else. Oh, I really liked this one. So this is Arc Brush's piece. Man, this is one of those scenarios where I look at this and I'm like, oh man, I wish I could paint like this. I really like the style and kind of the expressions that Arc Brush is using. This reminds me of an artist. Oh my god, his name is escaping me now. It's a guy I follow on Instagram. He does these kind of more stylized characters, and yeah, I think this looks really cool. And if we look back at the reference as well, this is a really good way, I think, to kind of be more exaggerative with your lighting and really push like, okay, like the shadows are still kind of this peachy color, but you can tell they're starting to become more like purpley pink, and it's creating this nice transition from warm to cool. And yeah, it's like this nice like sort of almost like round brush and spray brush kind of style. So yeah, this is a really, really awesome stylization. I like the way the hair was stylized as well. It's like you could go in and be really realistic about adding all these little curls. Like, that's more my style. But what Arc Brush kind of went and did was like, it looks like clouds. I'm going to paint clouds on the back of her head, and it's going to look awesome and very stylized and simplified. So yeah, it was pretty cool. All right, let's see who else we got. Got Biaro's pieces. So Biaro kind of gave us a bunch of like a turnaround for this character and everything. He's got without the cape version as well. One sec. So like this one. So let's see what he wrote. Trackmasters are the highest ranking units in the Malthex military roster, equipped in Gen 3 station suits and advanced Volcarite weaponry. These Golden Leaders command the mighty and mobile Frontier engines. These monolithic trains lay tracks as they cross all terrain, ever expanding the network to Great Malthea. Trackmasters have witnessed many battles and have usually contributed in some major way to the expansion effort or to the great city itself. Participating in rituals of prayer to the holy shape and being blessed by the brother forge a zealous and radiant individual. Such individuals who become track captains have the glory of adhering commands from the brother himself. When a conductor reaches a status worthy of a highest honor, they may be promoted to trackmaster. Doing so, they forge their birth name and take on the name of the track they lead. There are 8 main railways that expand from the city, which means there are always 8 trackmasters. See, that's really cool. It's nice to put lore down and then to kind of integrate a lot of these things, like the participating rituals of prayer. So like I'm even seeing like on this button there's some sort of, like holy type emblem. Like there's a sun sort of symbol down here. There's this like a symbol, maybe this is the trackmaster's insignia or whatever up there. So yeah, really going for it with the design is really cool. I would say in terms of this sort of like mesh thing, like this is really hard to pull off. I would probably look at how they do it. Like this almost reminds me of like Superman's suit in the newest Superman movies. And I think what you'll notice and what you can probably get more away with is if you create more like shadow areas and then you only bump out these textures on like very, very specific spots on the armor or the whatever bodysuit or whatnot. It helps sell the fabric a little bit more. Let's see if I can just find a reference. Yeah. So hold on. There we go. Okay, so he's like in basically broad daylight, but you'll notice how much shadow there is on a suit like this, and the texture is really only like popping out like dramatically where the light is sort of hitting. So like right down here, it's like you could very well get away with even like blending out a lot of this stuff and just hitting the texture like here, here, and here with a brush that you've made or something like that, and it's still gonna sell the fact that it's like a rounded form. So I would I would recommend that. Oh, what's up? Pat is here. Hey, thanks for joining, man. Okay, so there's that. The other thing too, and I know we've sort of talked about this before, is just thinking through like how these armor pieces like really work and making sure that they are really conforming to the body of the character. I almost think, Biaro, you're kind of like overcomplicating some of this stuff sometimes. And yeah, I would just maybe do some studies on like armors, like actual medieval armor or whatever, or even just like, I don't know, like look at like Riot Games armors or like some armors in video games and kind of see how they're approaching it. Because you're kind of adding like all these little pieces that are I think maybe just adding more distraction than helping your case, right? It's almost like we could have gotten away with something more like this. I don't know. Armor design can go like a million ways. Obviously, for this character in particular, it's more about like a status symbol than it is about like protection. So you can be a little bit more lenient about it, but I think just not creating so many separations lends itself to more like visually pleasing like look. So like with this one, you have a separation here, a separation here. Like with a shin pad, you could realistically just like go all the way down with this and have more room for, I almost want to just like redraw this. So okay, so you've got your kind of knee pad, you have your like winged thing, and then you could just have a backing piece, allow room for the ankle to breathe and to rotate. And I'd maybe even follow like the kneecap, right? So in this instance, it's literally just like 1, 2, 3 pieces, and then I guess 4 for the boot, as opposed to like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces, you know. It's like more complicated doesn't necessarily always mean better. So I would just keep that in mind for future references. The other thing too, in terms of just silhouettes and stuff, if you're gonna have this like really cool big like ponytail thing, like I would just make it freaking crazy. Like this is just gonna help your silhouette read better if you just make this ginormous and exaggerated. Like you're already kind of creating these like fantastical characters, you know, and then you can put the text, I don't know, more like that, and maybe some of it is obscured, but yeah, go crazy with the silhouettes. You know, the shoulder pad too, right? Like maybe you have one that like sticks out really far, and then the cape can, this will allow the cape to not be like so symmetrical. You can have a little bit of asymmetry with the character. So just some things to think about. Cool. All right, let's see who else. You guys did a lot of work in the past couple weeks. Okay, and then here's BRO's September challenge, and BRO was also thinking pretty hard about how this creature would work too, which is really cool. I like all this stuff. I like the scale of one of your characters in relation to the monster as well. I'm just going to do a really quick kind of lighting critique. So if we put this in black and white, again, it's just like I can start to see that there's a little bit darker colors on the bottom, but like don't be afraid to just really punch this up, right? So in your shadow planes, you don't need so much variation in color. Like just let your shadow sit in shadow, and then let your lights have more of the detail. BR says that's a huge tip. I could save so much time on the mesh. Yeah, I think a big thing with painting also, in learning how to be a good painter, are ways that you can save yourself time while maintaining, if not improving, the overall aesthetic of something. Because I was at fault for that for quite a while, like just almost like overdoing everything, right? Like think about a simple way to do something, and think about how you can do it efficiently and effectively. I really like the colors of this thing, and I like the texture that you're starting to hit with it. But I think we can just like pump it up a little bit more. So on all of these top planes, let's just add like a down facing light that are hitting the tops of all of these planes, and it's just going to help your silhouette read a lot more, especially from this angle. See, even right here, it's like, don't be afraid to punch up those values. I think you're kind of sitting a lot in your midtones. Try to expand your value range a little bit more in each direction. And I think you're going to start to see improvements on your overall lighting. See, here's another example. You have the texture on the whole thing, and that's fine, but yeah, you could just almost like obscure the texture in the spots that isn't as important. All these feet have planes that are facing upwards. They'd all be catching the light. So the light would be darker all the way down here compared to up here, but we still want to hit the tops of the feet with light, and it's going to just make everything read a little bit better. It's a really interesting design. So I'm looking at my other screen because it's almost like an automatic thumbnail for me. See just what very, very simple lighting edits can do to making something feel like much, much more three-dimensional. Okay. All right, I feel I would love to read this live right now, but I feel like I should move on. But yeah, this is a cool design. I would actually go back into this BRO if I were you and update it. The other thing too, this is me being like super anal and nitpicky. Make sure your box is centered. I can tell that there's more space on this side than there is on this side. So stuff like that is just like polish and attention to detail steps. Cool. All right. This is Brazen Tunes piece. So this is interesting because this artist like added a cool little bow to the character. Cool prosthetic arm. I almost feel like the grid background is like too noisy. I get that this is more of like a graphic-y sort of piece, but I would almost like fade it out in certain areas so that you can let the character punch out from the background a little bit more and have more room to breathe. But otherwise, nice job. This is J-Dog's piece. Nice. This is pretty nice piece. This is again, I know you guys are all like making stuff for Instagram, but like, oh man, let's just crop this in. This is gonna drive me nuts. Like we do not need that much space on the sides, right? Like this looks so much nicer to me. I think even just kind of there. Yeah. Otherwise, you want to go really exaggerated, really have her like skirt billowing and like show that off. But otherwise, it's just not necessary. I'd say too, just this is nitpicky, but kind of lift up her chin some more. I think part of what makes the reference so nice is she has this very like elegant lift to her head. So just kind of analyzing how that actually looks and replicating that is going to help push that like gracefulness she has. So yeah, all right, let's move on. This is, okay, this is Lumber Bumber's other piece. Let's see. Appreciate all the feedback. Yeah, man, no problem. That animal looks like it belongs in a horror movie. Yep. Okay, so big ol' ears give them sensitive hearing. Eyes that can perceive IR spectrum to detect hairs to detect air disbursement. I don't know what that says. Villa create IR light through bioluminescence. See, again, I like that this is like super thought through. I almost feel like I like this. I think these are two different characters. I think I like this character more. I almost wish that we got this character in a cool pose. This one's cool too. I'm not sure also, and this again goes back to kind of like your presentation. I get that this is like more of a sketch, right? But all these like big letters and numbers and stuff like that, it takes away from the piece, right? Like it's okay to have notes to yourself, but when you're presenting it to an audience or for critique, either remove it or like redo it in a nice way. Like, look, once I knock all this out, you're going to see how much more pleasing this thing is to look at and how much easier it is for us to like understand what's going on without the giant text, right? Yeah, I mean, and then if we crop this in, so this is part of not only like I'm talking about this stuff for critique, guys, right? But the reason that I always bring this stuff up so much is because when you're presenting a portfolio and you're trying to get work, this kind of stuff can literally make or break how somebody perceives your work, right? Because they want to know that you are presenting the most polished, like professional version of what you're presenting them as you possibly can. So again, I know it's like work in progress, stuff is sketches, stuff like that, but if I were you guys, I would not even post something unless you've taken that like 2 minutes to just once over and just be like, okay, can I crop something in? Can I reposition something? Can I like make the text look nicer? Like these are all very quick changes that are going to make a huge difference when not only when we're looking at your work, but when a potential employer will look at your work as well. So, because this is a cool character, right? Like if the artist just had like little blurb of text down here to get all of these points across, or if they were like really nicely, laid out like with, oops,